It was December 9th, 2001. The holiday season had wrapped itself around the small town of Eden, North Carolina, like a warm blanket. Christmas lights decorated front porches. Children begged parents for gifts. Families were planning dinners, buying trees, writing Christmas cards. It was, by every measure, a perfectly ordinary December evening in a perfectly ordinary American town. Michele Hundley Smith was 38 years old. She was a mother of three, two sons named Gary and Kevin, and a daughter named Amanda. She lived with her husband in Eden, a quiet town nestled in Rockingham County, sitting right at the border where North Carolina meets Virginia. By all outward appearances, Michele was a regular woman, a mother, a wife, a neighbor, someone you might pass at the grocery store and exchange a friendly smile with, never suspecting that her life held any particular darkness. That evening, after 8 o'clock at night, Michele walked to her husband and told him she was heading out. She said she was going Christmas shopping, specifically to the Kmart store in Martinsville, Virginia, just across the state line, a drive of roughly 20 miles, short, familiar, ordinary.
You're watching Hidden Chronicles, not just a channel, but a community driven by curiosity and the search for truth. If you believe every mystery deserves answers, you're in the right place. Please subscribe to stay informed, share to spread awareness, and join the conversation below, because together we don't just watch the story, we uncover what's hidden.
She got in her car. She pulled out of the driveway of their home in Stoneville, and she drove away into the cold, dark December night. She never came back. Her husband waited. Minutes became hours. Hours became the early morning of December 10th. Still no Michele. Still no call. Still no word. He told himself there must be a reason. Maybe she stopped somewhere. Maybe she ran into a friend. Maybe the car had a problem. He tried to stay calm. But one day passed, then 2, then 5, then 10. The silence grew heavier and heavier, like snow building on a rooftop. And then one day, the whole weight of it collapsed. Michele Hundley Smith had simply vanished. Her car was gone. Her purse was gone. There was no note, no message, no trace. It was as if she had driven into the night and dissolved into the darkness itself. 3 weeks after she disappeared, on December 31st, 2001, New Year's Eve, her husband finally walked into the Rockingham County Sheriff's Office and officially filed a missing persons report. And with that, the search for Michele Hundley Smith officially began. A search that would last not days, not months, but 24 years. Let us take a moment to understand the world Michele was living in before that night. Eden, North Carolina, is a small, close-knit community, the kind of town where people know their neighbors, where gossip travels quickly, where secrets are hard to keep. It sits in the northwestern corner of Rockingham County, with a population of just over 15,000 people. In a town like Eden, a woman disappearing is not just a news headline, it becomes part of the town's identity. People talk about it at the diner, they mention it at church. Children hear about it from their parents. The mystery becomes woven into the fabric of everyday life. Michele had grown up in the area. She had roots there, family, connections, a history. She was not a stranger passing through. She was one of Eden's own. And now she was gone. Her 3 children were left behind in an instant. Amanda, her daughter, would spend the next 2 decades living in the shadow of her mother's disappearance. Her sons Gary and Kevin would become adults without ever knowing the full truth of what happened to their mother. And Michele's husband, the last person who saw her, the man who reported her missing, would spend those same 2 decades under a quiet but suffocating cloud of suspicion. In small American towns, when a wife disappears, the husband is always the first suspect in the court of public opinion. It doesn't matter what the evidence says. It doesn't matter what investigators conclude. The whispers begin almost immediately, and they never fully stop. There were many people acting as if they just knew he was involved, Amanda would later write, even before social media was big where we live in a small town. He was never charged, never arrested, never formally accused, but that almost doesn't matter, because in a small town, being suspected is its own kind of punishment, one that lasts for years, sometimes forever. When the investigation officially opened in early 2002, the Rockingham County Sheriff's Office moved quickly. They began following leads, knocking on doors, checking with Michelle's friends and relatives. They checked hospitals and morgues. They circulated missing persons flyers with Michelle's photograph, a smiling woman with warm eyes, the kind of face that makes you feel like you've known her for years. But the trail was almost immediately cold. Michelle's car had never been found, no accident report, no abandoned vehicle, no trace of it anywhere on the roads between Stoneville and Martinsville, Virginia. The car had simply vanished, along with its driver. When a person disappears, their vehicle is often the single most important piece of evidence. Where it was left tells you something. The condition it is in tells you something. The presence or absence of signs of struggle tells you something. But when the car also disappears, that silence tells you something too. Investigators pursued countless tips in those early months. Neighbors remembered what they remembered. Friends were interviewed. Every lead was chased. Every door was knocked on. And every single one of them led to nowhere. As months passed, the case attracted larger attention. The North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation was brought in. That alone told you this was being taken seriously.
Then came the involvement of the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA. That detail caused an immediate ripple in Eden and beyond. Why would the DEA be involved in a missing persons case? The agency typically deals with drug trafficking, organized crime, large-scale narcotics operations. Their involvement in Michelle's case set imaginations running in directions that may have been entirely wrong. Rumors spread. Some whispered about drug connections. Others speculated about organized crime. Some believed Michele had witnessed something she shouldn't have and had been silenced. And then, adding to the gravity of the situation, the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the case as well. The FBI, the DEA, the State Bureau of Investigation, the local sheriff's department, all working simultaneously on the disappearance of one woman from a small North Carolina town. And still, nothing. The years began to pass in the way that years do when a case goes cold. 2002 became 2003. 2003 became 2005. 2005 became 2010. With each passing year, the investigation became quieter. New cases demanded investigators' attention. The public gradually forgot the name Michele Hundley Smith. The news cycle moved on. But Amanda never moved on. She had been a young woman when her mother disappeared. As she grew older, she took it upon herself to keep her mother's name alive. She created a Facebook page, Bring Michele Hundley Smith Home, and used it to share updates, appeal for tips, and connect with anyone who might have information. She gave interviews to local news stations. She spoke with journalists. She reached out to true crime communities online. In 2021, exactly 20 years after her mother vanished, Amanda sat down with a television reporter and spoke about what those 2 decades had felt like. Sometimes it's hard to remember the way she looked, Amanda said. Not like her glamour shots, but everyday life. People say it gets easier, but it really doesn't. You just forget. She paused, and then said something that stayed with everyone who heard it. She loved singing in the car. She had a beautiful voice. She loved Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn. Those small details, the singing, the country music, the sound of a voice in a car, are the things families hold on to when someone disappears. Not the headlines, not the investigation, not the theories. The small human things, the things that made that person real. "There's 1 million questions and no answers," Amanda said. In 2020, Amanda appeared on NBC's Dateline, one of the most watched true crime programs in America. The case got national exposure. Tips came in from around the country. On that program, Amanda spoke about her father's theory, the idea that perhaps Michele had simply chosen to leave. "He believes she just took off and left him and us that night," Amanda said. "And I guess that's possible. It's hard to rule out that she just left all of us and started a new life." But even as she said those words, the uncertainty was clear in her voice. Because possible is not the same as knowing, and not knowing for 20 years is its own kind of endless suffering.
Let us talk for a moment about what it truly means to have a loved one go missing. It is a category of grief unlike any other. When someone dies, there is pain, deep, devastating pain. But there is also, eventually, a path forward, a funeral, a final goodbye, a grave to visit, an acknowledgement from the world that this person is gone and is being mourned. When someone goes missing, none of that exists. There is no body, no funeral, no official moment of farewell. There is only absence, a presence-shaped hole in your life, and a question mark that sits over everything, day after day, year after year. You cannot grieve fully because you don't know if there is something to grieve. You cannot move on because moving on would feel like abandonment. You exist in a permanent in-between, suspended between hope and despair, never fully able to land in either. That is what Amanda lived with for 24 years. That is what her brothers Gary and Kevin lived with. That is what Michele's brothers, her cousins, her extended family, all of them lived with. And then there was Michele's youngest brother, whose full name has not been made public, but who was known to be deeply affected by his sister's disappearance. Before he died, without ever knowing what happened to Michele, he asked Amanda for one thing. He asked her to find her mother. He asked her to never stop looking. Amanda made him that promise, and she kept it. The Rockingham County Sheriff's Office never fully closed the case. In 2020 and again in 2021, they posted public appeals for information online. Both times they offered cash rewards for anyone who could provide credible information about Michele's whereabouts. Tips came in. They were investigated. They went nowhere. But the case file stayed open. The investigation, quieter now but not dead, continued. And then something happened that no one saw coming. February 19th, 2026. 24 years, 2 months, and 10 days after Michele Hundley Smith had driven away from her home on that cold December night. A notification arrived, a ping through a national missing persons database that flagged Michele's name. According to Sheriff Sam Page, this automated notification from the national database was what cracked the case open. Sergeant A. Disher and Detective C. Worley were assigned immediately. They began working the lead. They gathered information. They made calls. They prepared. The next day, February 20th, 2026, they drove to an undisclosed location somewhere in the state of North Carolina. They knocked on a door, and standing before them, alive, well, apparently healthy, was Michele Hundley Smith. She was now 62 years old. She had been living in North Carolina the entire time. Not in another country, not on the other side of the world, right there in the same state she had disappeared from, living her life. The detectives spoke with her.
She confirmed her identity. She confirmed she had left voluntarily. She confirmed it was her own choice. And then she told them why. She said she had left due to ongoing domestic issues at the time. She did not elaborate. She did not go into detail. Those 5 words, ongoing domestic issues at the time, were all she offered as an explanation for 24 years of silence. And then she made one final request. She asked the detectives to keep her location private, not just from the public, from her own children. Sheriff Sam Page stood before cameras and reporters and tried to explain the unexplainable. He confirmed that Michele had left voluntarily. He confirmed she was in good health. He confirmed her reason, domestic issues. And he confirmed something else, that the Rockingham County Sheriff's Office had no official record of any domestic incidents at her home before her disappearance. That detail is significant. It does not mean nothing happened. It means nothing was ever officially reported. And across America, the vast majority of domestic situations, including the most serious ones, are never reported to police. I acknowledge that domestic issues can mean a lot of different things, the sheriff said carefully. He noted that no criminal charges would be filed against Michele. He had consulted with the district attorney's office. Detectives had conducted a full case review. The conclusion was clear. There was no evidence to support any criminal charges. In the United States, an adult has the legal right to walk away from their life. It is not illegal to leave. It is not illegal to start over. It is not illegal to disappear as long as you are not fleeing a crime or abandoning dependents who are minors. Michele's children had all been adults for many years. Legally, she had done nothing wrong. Legally. But law and morality are not always the same thing, and the conversation that followed Michele's discovery would make that gap very, very clear.
News of Michele's discovery spread almost instantly. Within hours, the story had gone viral across social media. People who had never heard the name Michele Hundley Smith were suddenly debating her choices, her reasons, her right to privacy, and her responsibility to the family she left behind. Online, the conversation split sharply into 2 camps. On one side, people expressed outrage. How could a mother do this to her children? How could she watch her daughter spend 2 decades running a Facebook page, begging the public for tips, fearing the worst, and say nothing? How could she allow her husband to live under a shadow of suspicion for 24 years? On the other side, others urged caution. We don't know what she experienced at home. We don't know what drove her to that breaking point. We don't know what desperation feels like from inside someone else's life. Judge carefully. Both perspectives contain truth. That is what makes this case so difficult, so deeply, uncomfortably human. When Amanda Smith heard the news that her mother was alive, was well, and had chosen to keep her location secret, she turned to the only place she had always turned to with her feelings. She went to Facebook, to the page she had built and maintained for 24 years. She posted a statement, and the words she chose revealed just how much pain, love, confusion, and grace can exist inside a single human heart at the same moment. These last couple of days have been a whirlwind of emotions, she began. She addressed her father first, defending him against years of unfair suspicion. My dad has been through so many accusations since all the way back then. Even before social media was big, where we live in a small town, there were many people acting as if they just knew he was involved. She wanted the world to know clearly and publicly her father had nothing to do with her mother's disappearance. He had been falsely suspected. He deserved acknowledgement. And then she turned to her mother. Everything I have been through in life, I can absolutely understand taking off and leaving. That sentence stopped countless people in their tracks. Here was a daughter, one who had spent 24 years searching for her mother, saying she understood. Not excusing, not approving, but understanding. She continued, I am not saying that she gets off scot-free without accountability or responsibility, because she absolutely needs to do that.
Both things at once. Understanding and accountability. Empathy and consequences. That is what Amanda was holding in her hands. In another post, one that many readers found heartbreaking, she wrote something more personal still. She said, I knew she was alive. It's just a feeling I had my whole life. A daughter who spent 24 years holding on to a feeling that turned out to be exactly right. And then Amanda thought of her uncle, her mother's youngest brother, who had died without ever getting this answer. She spoke to him out loud through her words, the way people speak to those who are no longer here to listen. I'm going to say this out loud, she wrote. She's okay, Brian. Michelle's sons, Gary and Kevin, released a joint statement, and their words were perhaps the most remarkable of all. We want Michele to know that we are so glad she is alive, they wrote. We love her. We are not mad at her. All is forgiven. All is forgiven. 4 words. No anger, no conditions, no demands, just forgiveness, offered freely, without knowing the reason, without receiving an apology. We would love to be in contact with her, they continued, but we understand that she has decided she doesn't want contact as of now, and we respect her wishes. Read that again. They respect her wishes. After 24 years, after growing up without their mother, after years of not knowing if she was alive or dead, their first response was to respect her wishes. That kind of grace does not come easily. It is hard-won. It is the product of years of pain, prayer, therapy, and the slow, difficult work of choosing not to let bitterness win. Michelle's cousin, Barbara Bird, had also spent years searching and hoping. Bird had given interviews to local news stations over the years. She had appeared in media coverage of the case. She had never stopped believing Michele was alive. When she heard the news, her reaction was a mix of joy, relief, and the quiet hunger of someone who has waited a very long time for an answer. I kind of want to go outside and scream, "She's alive! She's alive!" Bird told reporters. She said her biggest question, the one burning inside her for 2 decades, was simply, what happened? What made you leave? What happened that December? And yet, even with all those questions burning inside her, Bird chose to honor Michelle's choice. I understand and respect that she doesn't want any of us to contact her, she said. I'm not angry. The biggest answer I had today was that she was alive. Nothing else matters right at this moment. Let us now try to understand, as honestly as we can, the woman at the center of this story. Michele Hundley Smith was 38 years old when she made her choice. Not a teenager acting on impulse, not a young woman with nowhere to turn, a 38-year-old adult with children, with family, with history, who reached a point she felt she could not endure any longer. She told police she left because of domestic issues. She did not elaborate. She did not name them. She did not give a list. But here is something worth understanding. The absence of a police record does not mean the absence of suffering. In America, the majority of women who experience difficult domestic situations never call the police. They endure in silence. They hide the truth from neighbors, from family, sometimes even from themselves. And sometimes, when the weight becomes unbearable, they don't leave by calling a hotline or going to a shelter. They leave by simply driving away one December night and never coming back. Is that the right way to handle it?
There are children involved. There are consequences. There is pain spread across an entire family for an entire generation. Those things are true. But they do not tell us what Michele experienced behind closed doors. They do not measure the pressure that built up inside her over the years. They do not tell us what she felt in those final weeks and months before December 9th, 2001. Only Michele knows that, and right now, Michele is not talking.
There is one detail about this case that deserves special attention. One fact that, buried among the headlines, says something profound about the nature of this story. Michele Hundley Smith was found still using her real name. She had not taken a new identity. She had not changed her name. She had not constructed an entirely new persona. For 24 years, she had been living in North Carolina, in the same state she disappeared from, under her own name. Think about what that means. It means she was not hiding exactly. She was simply living, quietly, separately, off the radar of people who were looking for her, but not under a different name, not in a different country, not constructing an elaborate false identity. It also means, and this is important, that she took a significant risk. At any point, a background check, a database ping, a routine encounter with law enforcement could have flagged her name. And eventually, that is exactly what happened. A National Missing Persons Database notification on February 19, 2026, triggered the chain of events that led detectives to her door. She was, in a sense, always findable. She just hadn't been found. Until she was. The detectives who found her, Sergeant Disher and Detective Worley, had inherited a case built over many years by many officers. Sheriff Sam Page spoke about his team with visible pride. They went and found this young lady that has been missing for many years, 20-plus years, he told People magazine. We don't see a lot of missing person cases like that. But now at least the family has closure, he said, and they know she's okay. Closure. It is a word we reach for in cases like these. But what does closure actually mean when the person who was missing chose to be missing? Closure here does not mean resolution. It does not mean reunion. It does not mean apology or explanation or healing. Closure here means simply this: knowing she is alive. After 24 years of not knowing whether to grieve or to hope, the family now knows. She is breathing. She is well. She is alive. That is not the answer Amanda was hoping for. It is not the reunion she dreamed of. It is not the explanation that would make sense of everything. But it is something. After 24 years, it is something. The District Attorney's Office in Rockingham County conducted a full review of the case evidence presented by the detectives. Their conclusion was issued clearly. No criminal charges would be filed against Michele Hundley Smith. After the case review and the absence of probable cause or evidence to support a pursuit of criminal charges, the decision not to pursue criminal charges by the investigators was supported by the district attorney, Sheriff Page announced. And so the legal chapter of this story closed. Michele had committed no crime. She had left voluntarily. She had harmed no one in a legally prosecutable sense. What she had done, the emotional harm, the years of suffering, the children who grew up without their mother, those are things that no courtroom could adequately address anyway. There is something else this story teaches us, something that goes beyond the individual case of one woman in one small town. Every year in the United States, hundreds of thousands of people are reported missing. The vast majority are found quickly, within hours or days. Some are found tragically. A smaller number simply disappear by choice, building new lives away from the ones they left behind.
These voluntary disappearances tend to share certain characteristics: financial ruin, overwhelming mental health struggles, relationships that feel inescapable by any conventional means. And for women in particular, domestic circumstances that, whether or not they rise to the legal definition of abuse, become unbearable to live inside. Michelle's story belongs to this category. Not the category of crime, not the category of tragedy in the traditional sense, but the category of desperation, of a person reaching the absolute edge of what they can endure and making a drastic choice in the dark.
Was it the right choice? That is not for us to decide from the outside looking in. Was it a choice with enormous consequences for people who loved her? Absolutely, without question. Can both of those things be true at the same time? Yes, they can. They are. It is now February 2026. Michele Hundley Smith is 62 years old. Somewhere in North Carolina, she is living her life, waking up each morning, making coffee perhaps, walking outside to feel the cold winter air, going about her days. We do not know what those 24 years looked like, whether she found peace or carried guilt or built something she is proud of, whether she thought about her children every day or whether she had to force herself not to. We do not know if she ever sat in front of a television and recognized herself in a Dateline episode. We do not know if she ever searched her daughter's name online and found the Facebook page Amanda built, the one dedicated to finding her. We do not know if she read her son's words, "All is forgiven," and felt something break open inside her chest. We don't know any of that, and we may never know, because Michele has chosen silence, and for now, that silence is hers to keep. Let us end where we began. December 9th, 2001, a cold night in Eden, North Carolina. A 38-year-old woman walked out of her house after 8 o'clock in the evening. She told her husband she was going Christmas shopping. She got into her car and drove away. Somewhere on that drive, somewhere between her driveway and the Kmart in Martinsville, Virginia, she made a decision. We don't know exactly when it came to her. We don't know if she cried. We don't know if she pulled over on some quiet road and sat in the dark for an hour before finding the courage to keep going.
We only know that at some point she did not turn back. She kept driving, past the Kmart, past Martinsville, past everything familiar, into a new life that nobody knew was waiting for her. For 24 years, she was a ghost, present enough to breathe and live and wake up every morning, but absent from every birthday party, every holiday, every milestone that her children experienced without her. Her daughter grew up and made a Facebook page to find her. Her brothers aged and one of them died, never knowing if his sister was alive. Her husband lived under suspicion for 2 decades, accused of something he did not do. And Michele kept living, quietly, separately, under her own name, in the same state where everyone who loved her was looking. On February 20th, 2026, 2 detectives knocked on her door. And she was there, 62 years old, alive, well, and still, even now, not ready to come home. Maybe someday she will call Amanda. Maybe someday she will hear her daughter's voice and remember the sound of singing in the car. Conway Twitty, Loretta Lynn, a beautiful voice that still lives in Amanda's memory. Maybe she will reach out to Gary and Kevin and hear those 4 words for herself. All is forgiven. Or maybe she won't. Maybe the life she built in the dark will remain separate from the life she left behind. Maybe the 2 worlds will never meet. And perhaps the hardest truth in this entire story is the one we must sit with at the end. She has the right to make that choice. Michele Hundley Smith is not a villain. She is not a hero. She is a human being, flawed, complicated, wounded in ways we cannot fully see, who made an impossible choice in what felt like an impossible moment, and she has lived with that choice and its consequences every single day since. For 24 years, she was a name on a missing persons flyer, a photograph on a Facebook page, a case number in a database, and now she is something else. She is alive. She is found. She is free in all the complicated, painful, imperfect ways that word can mean. What she does with that freedom is up to her, and only her. This was the story of Michele Hundley Smith, a woman who vanished into the American night in December 2001, a family that never stopped looking, a daughter who made a promise and kept it, and a truth after 24 years of searching that was stranger, quieter, and more human than anyone had imagined. If this story stayed with you, share it. Leave your thoughts below. And if you had never heard the name Michele Hundley Smith before today, now you have, and now you will remember. Thank you for watching.